Hi, I'm Ryan Loftus, and I decided to do a video for my final reflection on Writing 235. And mostly I'm going to talk about two projects, the blog specifically, as well as the final project, the collaborated project, because those I'd say really had the biggest impact on me as a writer in general. So to start off with the blog, there were a lot of things that I covered there that not a lot of people really like to talk about a whole lot per se. I'm just looking back at it right now, and in particular, the one that comes to mind was the one labeled "Why So Liberal?" And I talked about my school, URI, in particular, and to be honest, it made me a little uncomfortable when I was writing and thinking that people anywhere would be able to see this. People at URI might be able to see it. My parents, friends, whatever. Not that I didn't necessarily want people to know that I thought these things. It was just more of, wow, I'm actually writing this online and sending it out there. And I think that goes a lot with what we really talked about in the first couple of days of class, where one of the questions Frank brought up was why we don't necessarily, or like what our oppositions are and fears to posting online, and permanence was one of the things that came up. And I think that has something to do with it. I mean, now that I am at the point, like the rest of us, we're all looking to get a job fresh out of college. So, it does, you got to think about what you're posting online. But at the same time, when I did write these posts out, I tried to do it in a way that I was confident with my opinions and I felt strong about them. And I really feel like that makes it not okay necessarily to say whatever you want, but as long as what you're saying is, respectful to everybody that you're talking about and you say it in a reasonable manner, then there's nothing wrong with voicing your opinions online. Because there's nothing wrong with voicing your opinions in person, and online is supposed to act as an extension of the way we use communication in person. It's just supposed to be more a remote and be able to do it from further away and reach a larger audience and possibly do it better with videos and whatnot. But it's still supposed to be the same thing. So I like to push the boundaries of conversation sometimes. I like to get people riled up, and I guess I do like to do it online, but I also don't want to do it in just the way that most people think of getting people riled up online, and which is basically just irritating people, and that isn't productive in any way, if you ask me. But that post aside, I mean, there were other posts which I did discuss some other things like that. Like the next one after that, I sort of continued what I was talking about previously. But that was a fun post to write when I discussed the picture we chose in class, actually. I really enjoyed the picture project where we just decided a picture that defined us as a writer. I chose the picture of the drummer. And yeah, you got to read the blog, though, to see what I said. But that being said, I also just got completely off topic. I literally named a post Getting Off Topic. That one I talked about everything from what we need to do to save the planet to traveling to other planets and going through intergalactic space, which, it doesn't seem like it's related at all to what I was talking about before, but I felt I used the blog as a way to talk about things that I find of interest, and both of those things are relevant to me in sort of some way, but I also enjoy talking about them. So I feel like it was still okay to be able to talk about such things that don't seem related at all. But I was even able, I pulled it back in a little bit to relate it more to what I was trying to talk about, which was kind of just getting people to be more aware of the way that they're living, I guess. I don't know. It's tough to describe what I was going for with my blog as far as like an overall message or theme. I just enjoyed voicing opinions, I suppose. I guess my message was, don't be afraid to voice your opinions online. It's just like like I was saying, having a conversation, pushing the boundaries of that conversation is okay. If you feel comfortable doing it there, then why shouldn't you feel comfortable doing it online? So yeah, that pretty much sums up my blog. I really did, again, enjoy writing that. The posts, most of them came pretty easy to me. They just kind of just let them flow out. And honestly, I did have a lot of posts that I started writing and really didn't get all the way through. I didn't get to complete the thought. And then by the time I wanted to sit back down and start writing again, I wanted to write about something completely different. And that was what I did. And I do have, probably a half dozen half-written blogs in my notes. And I do wish I went back to complete some of them, but then again, when I go back and look at some of the other ones, I am glad I didn't complete them. But I don't know, I feel like starting the process of some of those, though, was able to lead to the ideas for the blogs that did eventually make it to fruition and are now on my website. So I feel like by still not completing those, I was still able to get something out of them and still be able to use that to make something else in a way. Not necessarily directly putting it somewhere, but making it into another use. So now to move on to the website project I worked on with Peter. And our project, we focused on how the way music streaming and the way that music producers are compensated has changed the way that music streaming and production is done. So to give a brief oversight of how it has changed, it used to be that you used to, artists used to write their music and then they would go on tour to advertise for their music, and then people would buy their music if they liked it in their concert. Now, people go on tour to make the money because they're not making any money with the sales of the actual music through the streaming services. Streaming services only really play or pay artists based on the amount of starts of songs, like how many times someone starts their song, not necessarily how long they're listening. So that means if someone has a 1.5-minute song that is just a complete earworm, and you can't get it out of your head, and you just keep starting it over and over and over all day, you listen to it on repeat, that artist is going to make a lot more money than, say, you still have a 10, 15 minute, that's long, and we haven't really seen a lot of 10-minute songs in a while, but, let's take a 6-minute song compared to a 2-minute song. That's 3 times more plays, which really adds up when people start listening to it over and over and over again, so... that was the main scheme of the way music streaming and production has changed, and artists have, of course, taken advantage of that, made their music shorter, made it more catchy. Peter had a really nice comparison in the presentation. It makes for a lot more Septembers and a lot less Stairway to Heavens. I thought that was really funny, but also at the same time very true, because you take those two songs and the song September by Earth, Wind and Fire, super catchy. People today, even like kids nowadays, still know that song just because of how catchy it is. And then you take Stairway to Heaven, and it's a much more drawn out song. It's not as catchy, but it's an amazing song that people still love and listen to, but it captures the audience in a different way. And some would argue that it forces the artist to be doing more work and make a better piece by doing it that way, opposed to just making the catchy earworm. But it also shows that those catchy earworms weren't necessarily a thing of just today. Like, those songs are older songs that were before this time of streaming music, so the artists were just making them to make them the way they wanted, in a certain sense. Yes, I'm sure they were thinking about, oh, this is a catchy rhythm, I bet people might get this stuck in their head type of thing, but not nearly to the extent that it is being done today. But when we were thinking about doing the project, one of the first things we thought we had to do was we thought we were going to have to take a stance on how we felt about this, like for our music listening, because we are both avid music listeners. We didn't know if it would be good or bad necessarily for the music that we like to listen to. And I still really haven't come to a conclusion on that. I mean, on the one hand, the music, you could argue that, yeah, it has become shorter, but who's to say shorter is worse necessarily? I am not a fan of the catchy earworm music, but I mean, I fall victim to it like everyone else every once in a while. I just try not to feed into it and play it on my own music, because that's how they get the money for it, as I just explained, if you just keep listening to it on repeat. But not that I'm opposed to necessarily giving any artist money. I don't know. I'd still like to pick my music based on the actual sound of it, not necessarily who's putting it out and how catchy it is, who else is listening to it and whatnot. So I don't really know if I have a stance on how I feel about music producers being paid differently. But I still, excuse me, I'm getting a little caught up on my words now. But from that, from the process of doing the project, we still were able to figure out a way to sort of take both sides of the argument. We did talk about all the pros and all the cons in the presentation. You got to watch that to see it, but yeah, basically I don't really feel one way or another about it, because some music is, obviously there's good music from today and there's good music from before this was happening, and there's bad music from today and there was bad music from before when this was happening. So I don't know, it's up to the artist on whether or not they want to try to take advantage of this extra benefit, I suppose you could call it. I'm not necessarily opposed to them doing it if they're able to do it in a way that they're still making music that I enjoy. I just think it is a little weird that it has changed the way that they're really making their money. Because, as I said, most artists are now making most of their money from going on tour, which is not the way that it was traditionally happening. And they're really not making that much money from people listening to their music, which sounds weird to me, because you would think that someone making music, and a music artist, the primary way they would get paid is by people listening to their music. And I suppose, yes, going on tour, they're listening to it live in person. But the fact, I just feel like it's weird, the fact that literally millions or possibly billions of people around the world are listening to their song, and that's not the primary way that they're paying their bills. But yeah. Overall, I enjoyed the class and thought I learned a lot about how to address audiences and what goals I was trying to achieve with that. The blog was a great way of doing that. I really had to think about who I was talking to a lot and what necessarily I was trying to say and how it might come off. You had to decide whether or not you really want to push one idea or kind of lean off on one idea and kind of just lightly introduce it and not necessarily force it onto someone. Not that I would force any idea, but you push some ideas more than others, and you have to choose which one to do based on who you're talking to or who you're trying to talk to. But yeah, I feel like I learned a lot about writing and rhetoric.